All right, Math 2, we've got side, 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 and side, angle, side. This is lesson 3-2. Forgot about that. All right, so put your name and your period on your paper. Our question for today is, are all triangles that share two congruent sides and one congruent angle congruent to each other? Explain. The answer is no, but you'll find out a little bit later. All right, so yesterday's notes, or the last notes that we took, was on congruent figures, and what we noticed is we had to prove every single side was the same and then every single angle was the same in order to say the two triangles are congruent. That's a little bit ridiculous, a little bit of overkill. We don't actually have to do that. There are some shortcuts that we can use to prove two triangles are congruent. The first one is called the side, side, side postulate, or we just write SSS. Now, in side, 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 this states that if or a triangle, two triangles are congruent, if all the sides are congruent. So here I've got two triangles. I notice in this triangle right here that this side is congruent to this side over here. So that works. There's one side. Then I notice that this side here is congruent to that one. There's the second side. And this side here, AC, is congruent to this side here, ML. All three sides are congruent. I know nothing about the angles, but I don't have to, because this is a new shortcut that we can use. I can now say these two triangles are congruent to each other because of side, side, side. I don't have to use the definition of congruent shapes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to write a congruent statement. Remember, the first triangle that you use in the congruent statement, it doesn't matter the order. So I'm going to do A, B, C is congruent to, now the second triangle, it does matter. Now A, I don't have an angle on it, so it's kind of hard to tell which one it goes with. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to look at the two sides that A is in between. So 1 tick mark and 3 tick marks is the angle, or the sides that make up the angle A. So I'm going to look for the one that is made of 1 tick mark and 3 tick marks on this one. It looks like it's L. L is the angle that's made up of 1 tick mark and 3 tick marks, just like A is made of 1 and 3. So A has to correspond to L. So I'm going to write L as my first letter. B is between 1 tick mark and 2 tick marks. Over here, K is between 1 tick mark and 2 tick marks. So B and K have to correspond to each other. And then finally, C between 2 and 3. And then over here, we've got M between 2 and 3. So LKM. It has to be this order. Now notice, now that the angles are in order, the sides are also in order. AB had 1 tick mark. LK had 1 tick mark. BC had 2 tick marks. And KM has 2 tick marks right there. And then the first and last letter is AC. AC had 3 tick marks. First and last over here is LM. LM, 3 tick marks. So they're all matching up. Now some of you are going to get lazy, especially around test time, and do them in any order. They're not correct unless they are in the correct order. So the first triangle, any way you want. The second triangle, it really matters. Okay, definition of a midpoint. Okay, a midpoint splits a segment into two congruent parts. So this is a little bonus rule definition that we can use in our proofs coming up. So that's just saying that if I've got a segment here, I'll call this segment like AB or something. So if I've got that segment, a midpoint has to be right in the middle. That's why they call it the midpoint. So I'm going to call the midpoint M. A midpoint splits the segment up into two congruent parts. So if that's the midpoint, so if this is true, then I'm now allowed to say that segment AM is congruent to segment MB, because that's what a midpoint is. A midpoint makes basically two congruent parts, two congruent segments. So if you have a midpoint, these two segments are going to be congruent to each other. All right, next one is an angle bisector. Kind of like a midpoint for angles, really. An angle bisector splits an angle into two congruent parts. So let's make an angle here. That looks about the middle of the angle or so. All right, so I'm going to call my angle ABC. So here's ABC. And then this ray here is going to be BD. So here's ABC. And I'm going to say that this ray right here is the angle bisector. If that's the angle bisector, it's telling me that this angle here and this angle here are congruent to each other. So if this is true, then anytime you have an angle bisector, it proves that you have two congruent angles, kind of like a midpoint for angles. Okay, so our then statement is that angle ABD, so this angle over here, has to be congruent to DBC because the angle bisector. All right, now we've got a proof to do. I forgot to make my diagram, so I'm going to have to draw that really fast. We'll probably just make it like the last one. So let's make a triangle. Make them touching again. Sorry, this is sloppy. We're going with it. All right. All right, good enough. This will be A, this will be B, C, and D. All right, so again, we've got our given. This is the information we already know, and this is what we're trying to prove. We're trying to prove that the two triangles are congruent. Now, before we said all three sides and all three angles have to be congruent. Now we've got a shortcut. We can now say all three sides are congruent. All right, let's see what we've got. They're saying that D is the midpoint of AC. All right, D is the midpoint of AC, so this is the midpoint. That means that these two are going to be congruent to each other. And then it says that AB is congruent to BC. So AB is going to be congruent to BC. And these are our given. So I'm just going to say, I know this is true because they gave it to me. It's given. Now I have proven one side is congruent. Some of you may be looking at that going, no, you've proved two because we know that D is the midpoint. Well, I know that D is the midpoint, but I haven't proven it because I didn't write down the congruent sign. So let's do that now. So I'm going to write AD is congruent to DC. There's my second side. Now I know this is true because they told me this is a midpoint, and a midpoint means this point is splitting this into two congruent parts. So these two parts have to be congruent. So the reason why I was able to do that is because they told me it was a midpoint. So I'm going to write definition of midpoint. Sweet. All right, so I've got two things proven. I need the third side. And just like the last set of notes, we're going to use the reflexive property. BD is congruent to itself. So BD from one side of the triangle, BD from this triangle is the same as BD from this triangle because they're the same exact side. They're sharing that side. So that's the reflexive property. All right, and step 4, now I have proven side, 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 that all three sides are congruent. That is enough information to say the two triangles are congruent. It's kind of like the courtroom. You present your evidence, and then when you present enough evidence to say that they're guilty or whatever, or that you can prove your case, then you just sit back and go, that's it, I rest my case, I'm done. And that's what we're doing here. We're resting our case. We're saying, you know what, I've proved enough without a shadow of a doubt. I know these two triangles are congruent. Why do I know they're congruent? Because I use side, side, side. And side, side, side says if I have three sides that are congruent, the two triangles are congruent. All right, we got one last section. Almost done. All right, the next one's called the side angle side postulate. Now here's what the side angle side postulate says. It says two triangles are congruent if two sides and the included angle are congruent. All right, so what's that mean? Here, let me just draw two really quick triangles. Okay, I've got a triangle here, I've got a triangle here. So side angle side says, okay, this side and this side are congruent. This angle and this angle is congruent. And then this side and this side are congruent. That's side angle side. We've got a side and the included angle. The word included just means the angle right in between the two sides there. So this only works if the angle is right in between. So now we can say that this is side angle side. Those two triangles have to be congruent because they have two congruent sides and the included angle, the angle right in between. All right, so next, which triangles are congruent? So there's three triangles here and only two of them are congruent. One of them should be left out. Now let's look at the first one. I've got a side, angle, side. I've got a side, an angle, and a side. I've got a side, angle, side. It looks like all of them have side, angle, side, but let's look closer. We need an included angle. Is this angle included? Yes, it's right in between. Is this angle included? No, because to be included, this would have to be two tick marks, not this one way over here. So this one does not work. This one is side, angle, side. The angle is included. You have to do it in order and you can't skip. So I can't say, okay, side, angle, skip this side and use this side over here. This one actually, if we wrote it, would be ASS, angle, side, side. And donkeys are never going to prove triangles are congruent. So never write a suspect word down on your paper because it's never going to work. Angle, side, side is not a thing. It doesn't work. So the angle has to be right in between. So these are my two triangles. So let's finish this off by doing a congruent statement. Triangle ABC, we now know must be congruent to triangle, has to be in the correct order. A was the one with the angle mark on it, so J goes with that one. B, a little bit tricky, but B is between one tick mark and no tick marks. So over here, I is between one tick mark and no tick marks. So those ones have to go together. And then finally, C is between two angle marks and no angle marks, and H is between two angle marks and no angle marks. So now we have it in the correct order for our congruent statement, and everything has to be perfectly in order for that to happen. And that is all you have for side, 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 and side angle side. Be good. Do your homework.